My name's Steve Badham. I'm from Nottingham Trent University. I'm an associate professor there, which is the career stage in between being a lecturer and a professor. And I study cognitive aging, and largely that involves memory tests. Memory is one of the things that people get concerned about as they get older. But cognition also encompasses things like attention and perception and so on. So by studying cognitive aging, I'm looking at people who are over 60 and largely comparing them to people who are under 30 and seeing the contrast of things that age well and age not so well.
Brilliant. So tell us a bit about this particular, or tell us what is it that got you interested in this field? Why study this area?
Oh, why study aging at all? So I initially started off being most interested in human memory. One example I give in a job interview is like, you have this feels like it's going off task here, but I'll say it anyway. If you have like an insect, like a wasp or something, it will constantly fly into a window because it can't remember that it's just done it. So memory, to me, memory was like a fundamental process of more complex, more deeper processing in order to increase your functional capability beyond that of a wasp on a glass window. So just the way I perceived the brain working had sort of memory as the keystone. So that's why I felt that would be a good sort of field by which to understand the brain. And then that naturally led me towards aging research because there's a huge appetite for it. There's we've had the baby boom. Those people who were born then are now reaching that age, and older adults are more keen in voting, so they have a disproportionate influence on policy and so on. So there's a big appetite for aging research, and correspondingly it was easier to get funding and so on if you were to do aging research. So I could study aging and I could study memory and I could get paid. So it was a good combo.
I appreciate the honesty. Well, and then as far as we're concerned, we're just really lucky because we then get to get the benefit of your insight, research and findings, and the people who are here today get to ask you and dig into some of that. So tell us a little bit about the research that you're going to talk to us about today. What was it that you did and how did you go about researching that? Yeah,
so I was working on a normal grant on something else, which is not worth going into detail on that. But what we found was that we were trying to replicate things that have been done 10, 20 years ago. And we were finding that our older adults were doing a bit better, or the age difference was getting a bit smaller in our research compared to previous research. So I had a very quick look at someone else's research. They had done a meta-analysis. You don't need to know what that is yet, but basically they had compared loads of data on memory over the years, and I looked at the age difference between a young group and an older group in historic studies, and I related that to the year in which they took place. So each study was conducted in a given year, and that's when it's published. And there was a trend there. So essentially, this work looked at that more formally, and the global message underlying the data is that the age differences, the difference between a young and older adult, is smaller now than it has been previously. So the older adults, if you like, are sort of catching up to the young adults in terms of cognitive ability, memory ability, attention ability, perception ability, and so on.
And that was essentially, so would you mind telling everyone here what a meta-analysis is? Because I sometimes refer to that in a couple of our workshops, and I think we shouldn't, I don't want to assume that everyone knows what it is. Can you just briefly explain what a meta-analysis is? Yeah, so there's a couple of ways of looking at historic research. You can sort of read it all and produce a verbal summary of it and your interpretation of it, and there's formal ways of going about that. But you can also do a quantitative analysis. You take numbers from a big array of existing research and combine those numbers into a new analysis, a meta-analysis. And so
for example, in this particular project, I was able to extract the age difference for a variety of studies that have occurred across time, and I was able to spot a pattern in that age difference when combining all of those studies from, I think it's from 1962 to 2022.
And give us a sort of a flavour of the scale of the meta-analysis. So you say you combine a number of studies. What sort of number of studies are you talking about?
It was this was a 3-study paper, so there's not a quick answer to that one. So study 1 was about 60 or so underlying studies. So that was a fair job, because you've got to read each PDF of each paper and pick out the number that you need, which is often well hidden in terms of the way they're written and so on. And another study 2 was actually a meta-analysis, so I utilised other meta-analyses to pull even more data. And then in study 3, I used my own historic data from my lab. So I've, in my career from 2006 to 2015, I think, or no, anyway, the years don't matter, but from my own lab, I'd tested about 1,000 people over a 7-year period, and was able to extract age differences in those data as well. Surprisingly, in that 7-year period, the trend was there as well, which shows it's quite powerful.
And you're saying this trend, so the trend being, well, put it in your own words.
I might have to go into a bit of background here to contextualize it, and this is where we're going to talk about technology and IQ and stuff like that. Basically, throughout the 20th century, people have been getting smarter. So you can take the same IQ test. Someone that took it in 1920 gets a lower score on average than someone who took it in 1980.
And I think that's called the Flynn effect, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So James Flynn, who has if you Google that on YouTube, you can get a nice TED talk from James Flynn himself, who explains it nicely. But essentially, changes in society are benefiting the later generations over the previous generations. I guess you're going to ask me something later about the underlying sources of that, but it's believed to be largely due to education and health and nutrition and stuff like that. So given that each later generation is more cognitively able than the former, when you compare a 20-year-old person to a 60-year-old person, you're not just comparing the effect of age, you're comparing the effect of when they were born. And that actually exaggerates the effect of age, because the person born in the earlier time period has had less environmental advantages. And what my data essentially show is that it's likely that those environmental disadvantages are going away, because an older adult who's 70 or so now was born in the 1950s, and that's when compulsory education was for longer, the war had finished, healthcare is more modern, education is more modern, and so the older adults as well as the young adults are getting this boost from environmental factors, which is shrinking age deficit going forwards. I can't remember the original question now. I think I've answered it.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just to kind of summarize the findings, really. So people now, basically a 60-year-old brain now is a better functioning brain than, say, someone who had a 60-year-old brain in the 1980s.
Yes, I'm pretty much. That is what the data say. It's difficult to be certain about such things, but that's what I think is happening. That's what my data show.
And at the beginning, one of the questions that Nicole was asking was, are there differences between men and women? Did your meta-analysis or the kind of examination of that throw out anything there at all?
I've got it open on another screen. I think I did look at gender as when possible. It's hard to
say that women's brains age better than men's. Not that I'm biased or anything.
No, I don't think so. I would have remembered it if there was anything much to say about that. But a lot of these studies are reporting like the proportion of females, and it's difficult because you've got an older group and a younger group who are different proportions. But it's really difficult to unpack in this meta-analysis format. But having said that, I think the general consensus of these data is that things that make you more healthy correspond to more able cognition. So if women are living slightly longer, then they're likely to be more cognitively able for a little bit longer as well.
So just if we kind of unpack some of these findings, if we're saying that someone now, so yes, you've got the fact that a 60-year-old brain now is in better health than a 60-year-old brain from, say, the 1990s. But you're also saying that the difference in cognitive ability between a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old is diminishing. Am I right?
Yeah, so anecdotally, we might know that people used to be shorter in like the Middle Ages and stuff because they had bad nutrition and what have you. And but that's sort of reached a ceiling effect. So we're not getting taller and taller the more healthy we eat. It's sort of, the average rates are about the same. And that appears to be, for me, that appears to be what's happening with the cognition. So yes, education's been advancing since 1950, but it might have been quite good, in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So we're reaching a point where we can no longer keep benefiting generation on generation by these things. So they're sort of leveling off. They're hitting a ceiling as to how much your environment can boost your cognition. We're technically leading a relatively efficient cognitive life now.
So we're almost as smart as we're ever going to be.
Yeah, I think that's so.
Well, until Elon introduces his Neuralink or something like that. It's scary.
Yeah, because there are countries like with conscription that do like an IQ test on every 18-year-old in the whole country. I think Finland does it, and so they get a hell of a lot of data on IQ tests on young adults, and there's potentially some evidence for it reversing, and that the IQ could be lowering, but the general consensus, in my opinion, is that it's hitting a ceiling and stopped, rather than continuing to grow.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the implication being for, I guess, anyone that's on this call, but actually more widely, is that it may have been that 40, 50 years ago, there was these stereotypes about, as you get older, you become more senile, maybe you're less cognitively able than you would have been in your 20s. Are you essentially saying now that's not true?
Yeah, it's definitely reduced a lot. So the ability we can expect of a 60-year-old now is better than 30 years ago. This Flynn effect has been essentially exaggerating the age difference. So we're looking, we're looking at older people and as a child and thinking they're really old, and then we look at an older person now, they should be more able than those older people we experienced when we were toddlers.
Yeah, amazing. So as far as any of our members are concerned, everyone just really needs to hear the message that you're really smart and actually just unbelievably able. And any employers that are kind of stuck in the dark ages of thinking older people aren't as wise or as able, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it basically needs to be revised, what we expect of an older adult's capability, which is much less decline than we are used to experiencing.
Yeah. And then, so I guess there's a point as well that, okay, fine, so that's the implication. This is just an amazing audience. They've got incredible brains. The findings are that brain health now is probably better than it ever has been, that the differences between the ages are shrinking and kind of falling away. How do we maintain that? So what does your research show is one of the sorts of things that as we get older and we want to maintain? I mean, you were saying, or Simon was saying before, he's cut out, you know, alcohol, and what is some of the research saying about how we maintain as good a brain health as possible?
Yeah, so if we look at things that work for reducing the effects of age, and don't get me wrong, these effects are still there. I've talked about comparing groups of young adults to groups of older adults, but there's plenty of existing research out there that compares the same individual over a 20-30 year period, and you still see them decline a little bit with age. So the age rate of decline is still there. And so we can look at ways of slowing that down. In this particular research that I've been talking about today, you can swap the year of age difference, so that trend across years, you can swap that data out for lifespan. So the difference between young and older adults is also directly related to the lifespan of the population at that time. So essentially, anything that's good for you to make you live longer and be more healthy seems to also be good for your brain. So that is going to be your exercise and your nutrition and so on. In response to Simon's question, so I'm not a nutritionist, so I can't advise on specific diets, but what I have seen is I've seen a study that used a technique whereby you give someone a questionnaire and just ask what they've been eating, and then follow it up years later and see how they got on. And there was this thing called the MIND diet, which is it's essentially similar to the Mediterranean diet, and people who were more closely adhering to this healthier diet were showing lower incidence of dementia in that particular study. And I think it also corresponds to general cognitive aging scores. So diet is a good thing. As I'm not giving you any groundbreaking new techniques you can use. You know, do more exercise, eat better, and so on. Yeah. But these things really do seem to work. I guess it might be of interest that the diet studies are actually hard to do ethically, because you cannot ethically give a control group a bad diet and an experimental group a good diet. So you can't really experimentally do this research. In terms of exercise with physical activity, what people tended to do is put the control group into a stretching and toning class where they're doing stuff, but they're not raising their heart rate, whereas the experimental group does, I don't know, walking or something that gets your heart going a bit. And by doing those experimental trials, you can really see that physical activity does work, and it is some studies have sort of shown improvements or reversal of decline by making someone physically fitter, better oxygen consumption, and so on.
Yeah. So just again for clarification, that's the stuff that elevates the heart rate as opposed to the stuff that might be stretching and toning.
Yeah, stretching and toning is the control group, because there's a lot of placebo effects involved with someone. Your experimental group, they've had to come to the lab and do something, and that in itself can give someone a bit of a boost. So a control condition that sort of matches the exercise condition, the best one seems to be sort of stretching and toning. So they're still coming to an exercise class, they're still engaging with a personal trainer and so on, but they're not getting any physically fitter.
So the takeaway here is elevate your heart rate. If you want to improve or potentially reverse some signs of aging, then actually the stuff that does get your heart rate going is more effective than stuff that might still be exercise related but doesn't get your heart rate going as much.
And it doesn't have to be a lot. There was one study in I don't know the names of the authors and so on, but it was a study where they got nurses in America to fill in a questionnaire every few years. So big, as you can imagine, there's lots of them. And those that did maybe like an hour and 20 minutes of walking every week, so it's only like 10-15 minutes a day. They were like about scoring the equivalent of a couple of years younger on these cognitive aging measures. So just a little bit, it's giving you a bit of a boost. It doesn't have to be a lot. And a colleague of mine I've just started working with, he really advocates standing up more. It does raise your heart rate just a little bit and takes you out of that sedentary state.
Brilliant. Is there anything else that you've come across in any of your research? And I'm just wanting to come back to Alison's question about, you know, if there's anything you've observed around use of technology and how, you know, has that got an impact, or is that showing an impact at all as far as we know on brain health?
I don't have anything other than my opinions. I don't have any scientific evidence.
Give us your opinion then.
I think that the older adults today are sort of more internet literate than 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, I suppose I do. Yeah, I have read that. Yeah, it's fairly obvious, but I have read that statistic somewhere. But I think that is translating to their ability at the sort of tests that I give them when they come into the lab and so on. So just, and it was part of the Flynn effect, the IQ change over generations, is that the lives are more complex now than they used to be. Jobs are more complex. There's more technology involved. So it's probably a good thing. I know Alison was talking about it in a negative context. So I did sitting there and scrolling through your phone, and it can't be good. It can't be good. But I personally don't know the evidence for that being negative. But I agree with Alison. That's probably not great.
All right. I am going to say thank you. As far as the questions that I've got are concerned, you've kind of gone through them all for us, so thank you very much.